When did you start keeping bees?
Well, the bees were mostly done by my father and brother. I was completely allergic to bees, and I got badly stung when I was young. So I was mostly the person in the background who helped them out in preparing the sections, putting the wax into them, and also later on when the bar frames became popular. That's probably in the early 1960s. But I got some very bad stings, and so I was told to avoid close contact with bees. Once I got stung on top of the head, and I got conked out, and I had to be brought to the doctor to get an adrenaline injection to bring me around. And anytime I did get stung, my eyes would close up, and so I stayed away from. But my father and brother were okay with.
How about yourself, Tony?
Well, I started out, my dad was the beekeeper initially. He had 3 hives back in 1953, 54, my earliest memories. As a beekeeper myself, sadly he got ill during the early 60s and passed away in 68. But my brother and I did the beekeeping for the last 5 years, under his instructions, of course. And then after he passed away, we did for a couple of years. But himself there, we were moving a hive, and very carefully one evening, and the bottom of the brood frame fell out of it in transit, and we got badly stung. We had covered ourselves fairly well, but we'd put our trousers into our socks, and they stung our ankles, and we went up to the doc, and he says, and it came up like 2 footballs. So we had to part with him at that point in time, and a local schoolmaster in the VEC, that was in Abbeyleix at the time, he took them over. He'd been with me dad during the years trading notes. So we had to give them up in 1969. Mum couldn't look after them either, so that was it. But the primary years were 55 to 65. He had 8 hives, and we were helping him all the time when we were back home.
Do you remember what kind of bees did he keep?
They were all kind of black bees. There was no such thing as different breeds of bees at the time that I remember.
I think there could be an Italian strain, was it?
Couldn't tell you what it was.
Small little bee, like.
Yeah, they were busy anyway. You know that. And but he used to talk to him like that, and he puffed the pipe, play a digger plug, and puffed the pipe to keep him out, and we would help him. I was stood by him, and he trained me in all of the aspects of the beekeeping.
What was your father's name?
Pat O'Brien. He was on an estate like Johnstown here in Abbeyleix, and he had 3 hives as my earliest memory. And then 1958, he went up local sawmill. There was a sawmill on the estate, and they built another 10 or 11 hives for him. So we had a lot of, we changed then with him. It was all sections. We built up the crates of sections, got the wax, put them together, built a frame for them. And then you had the brood frames at the bottom, but the rest was sections of honey all the way up. And as they come ripe, he'd put on a bee excluder, get them down, we'd take them off. And he used to sell them locally. And the Abbeyleix show started in 1953. And it was a great event, a great occasion, but they had a marquee with all the local veg and prize. And he won first prize every year, 1 and 6pence for the best capped section of honey. And the memories of that was ever so proud. I think there was probably only 3 or 4 beekeepers, but he always got the best one. But as a child, and then the honey was used every time you had a cold or a flu, you got the honey and the bees. But then he moved on to supers, I think they were called. They were like the brood frame, but they were big, long
bigger bar frames. Yeah.
Bar frames, yeah. I think he called them supers at the time. Yeah. They're the same size as the brood frame, but he got a churn then as well.
The extractor.
The extractor. Yeah. We had to get down, and we had a large churn, and had to spin it and strain it, and then he didn't have a car until 1959, 60, and the local lord had an old Hillman Husky, and he gave it to me dad. And one of my earliest memories with my mum was setting out to, we'd never been to Enniscorthy, to go bring it down to Chivers. So we hit off with this in the back of the husky anyway, but we didn't know what the slopes were like in Enniscorthy. I can still remember going up the hill and I watched the churns sliding back. But we survived it, and Chivers took it when we got home, really. But after that then he had run honey for sale to Chivers for a number of years.
Were Chivers a buyer, were they?
Yeah, we did. We used to have markets down here in the Isles of Bridgetown, that were usually probably in September, and also in Co-op in Parnell Street there in Wexford Town. I think there used to be another firm, McCluskey's, maybe later became Vine Valley, and they would come down in September, and they'd be taking off the honey in the middle of August, and that's where I came in, where I would decap the wax from the bar frame and put it into the extractor and spin it around, and then the extra wax then was melted down, and they would also buy the beeswax lumps as well. I forget now what they were charging, but we used to probably get two crates of bar frames in a hive, and maybe one crate of section honey, like.
Yeah.
And the section honey we could sell probably in Godkins in North Main
Local
Street,
shops,
Wexford. Yeah. So and that was much better tasting, like, and there was big demand for that, like, you know.
And what year were Chivers buying? Can you remember?
I was back in the 60s now.
Well, it's late 50s.
Yeah.
My mum had set out with me to come down.
Did you do that journey often?
That's the one I remember. I think we did a few times, but Dad was she first got ill in 1958, and she used to do the driving a lot. And so they might have faced down more, but the initial outing was herself and myself. And we were busy then. I was in school, and during the summer holidays we'd be churning away. But he also, like you mentioned, the creative sections. He loved the honey from the lime trees, and on the estate there were 2 columns, about a couple of 100 yards long, of lime trees. And as soon as they would flower, he would take out an unfinished crate of sections, store it away, and put another crate on, so that he'd have a crate of sections lime flavoured as well, which was his favourite. Same at the golf course. There was 2 big lime trees, and as soon as he'd see them, right, we'll change the sections, park the ones that were not complete, or put them into a weaker hive, and then.
What did the lime honey taste like?
It's slightly lemony flavoured off it. It was lovely. It was sweet, but it was just a little tang off it, I remember. We loved that. We mostly kept it for ourselves because he loved the lime trees. So every year, I mean, I was recently up in Abbey Lakes and met someone who'd golfed with my father, and he says, I'll always remember him saying on the golf course, he went past the flowers on the lime tree they had, because that was the time to change the section temporarily until the lime trees were over, and then he changed it back to different flavours.
I think in the 60s also there was a lot more clover growing in the swards.
Right. That's right, yeah.
And used to get off the apple trees as well, like, and the hawthorn. You see, there's not near much clover in the ground now, and it's hard for the bees to survive. And when it come to September, the bees would make the honey from the ivy, and it was a terrible taste. So we normally left that on for the bees to survive. Yeah. And sometimes they used to give it fondant, sort of a sugary.
That's right. Yeah.
Fondant. Yeah.
We had to melt sugar, and he put it into a layer for them to feed. Yeah. To support them during the winter.
You had to feed them and look after them, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And he did that mostly with a sugar that was melted. Brings up. I'd forgotten about the clover though, because that was another one of his favourites. Yeah. If they were on the clover. And on that estate, there was similar to this one. There was different plants came out at different times, and he could tell the flavour of the honey from them.
I suppose the meadows years ago were full of clover, weren't they?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. That was.
And probably
Yeah,
the blackberries as well, I suppose, was it?
Yeah.
Blackberry, yeah.
Well, we had to pick fruit on the estate that time. I was coming down here, I remember DDT. We were given a straw hat and dosed with DDT, but we picked fruit on the thing, and the bees were busy. You had to keep an eye out for bees and wasps when you're picking the fruit. Yeah.
And only for the bees, you wouldn't have had your damson trees and your apple trees and.
Yeah, well, even down in the Strand, I have a garden now. I've never seen apple blossom like this year. They're extraordinary. It
Yeah.
is the best apple blossom I've
Yeah, I
seen
see
for
them at home too.
about 10
There's
years.
a lot
But-
of bees on them as well. Like,
Well,
yeah.
I haven't spotted many bees, unfortunately. I'd like to see more on it.
Yeah, but, my father and brother kept the hives in an apple garden. There were 6 or 7 apple trees in it.
Yeah.
And by the time they finished, it had 20 hives, like, you know.
Yeah.
And my brother Michael made most of the frames himself, and he designed the extractor as well, and he got it made there in Hogan's Forge in Bat Street in Wexford Town. Like, you know, he was very good with his hands, like, you know.
So he made his own, designed his own extractor.
Yeah. Yeah. Then when we gave up bees, we passed it on to a cousin, like, you know.
You mentioned about a churn. Was it a butter churn you were using initially, was it?
It was like a barrel, like.
It was a barrel, and
Barrel.
with a handle on the side of
And
it.
it'd be
And
There'd be a
you'd
crate
speed-
inside and you could
fit two
four.
frames. Well,
yeah, we had
you
four.
Ours were two, and you spin it and it began to rattle and shake. You had to hold it down. But it shot
Extracted the honey from it like by centrifugal force, like,
to the wall of the
Yeah.
the section, and then there was a tap, and then we had to strain as well, because inevitably some wax
Yeah.
would come out, and
Melt that down then, sure, yeah.
yeah, chivers had to have it strained as well. So that was how we extracted it.
And were Chivers supplying the Irish market with honey?
I am not sure where, probably jam pots full of it. Yeah, he used to keep some jam pots full of honey and give it to friends and neighbours for Christmas presents and that. And it went down great, because, like in those days, honey was great. If you had a cold or a flu, give them a few spoons of honey. Better.
Yeah, how was it used for cures? What would you use it for?
Well, if you had any signs of a cold or flu, you were fed honey in the morning, you were fed honey when you're home from school, and you were fed honey in the evening.
You put it on bread as well, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the batch loaf they call it now. We used to call it turnover.
Yeah.
Turnover a summer's day, and there was homemade butter on the farm as well in the estate. Oh jeez, that went down a treat. It's lovely.
Did you ever see honey being used on a cut or a burn?
No, but it did remind me there. Dad used veil up when he was doing work on me. He had the pipe going inside the veil. You just see the smoke coming out, and he had bicycle clips in the end of the trousers as well,
So,
to stop the bees going up the leg of his pants. But yeah, I just remember him.
Yeah.
Lovely.
And your father used to smoke the pipe underneath.
Oh yeah, and he'd puff it. He had a puffer as well. It had the cardboard, the corrugated cardboard inside it. And you lit that and just had you squeezed the end of it, little bellows.
yeah.
And that he used that to get the bees down, right? But he also puffed the pipe. But strongly, I was thinking of it as doing the little note there. He never covered his hands, right? And the bees would be walking over his hands. Occasionally he'd get a sting, but he never touched it. He had the penknife.
The public could sense yet.
He had the penknife. And if you had a sting in the back of the hand, he'd just put the penknife over, because the bee sting, the little pack and the needle, and he'd just scrape it off the back of the hand.
As long as you don't squeeze the venom into
Yeah,
your...
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the same penknife he used to cut the tobacco, he was used to scrape the thing that was handy in his pocket as well.
Yeah, my father used to smoke a pipe as well.
Yeah.
Like.
Did he?
Yeah, and they puffed the pipe at the smoke from
Yeah.
the pipe.
Yours was the same.
Same, yeah. And he used to use an old sackcloth to generate the smoke. Like, you just set fire to it and put it into the chamber.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way it was done.
But this was a corrugated roll he used to get, you know, corrugated, fluted with, because they wouldn't come get. There was fluted boxes for the baby food to protect it, and that was great for the bellows.
So your love of beekeeping came from both your fathers.
Oh, totally, yeah, totally, yeah. And it's just summers evening, he was called mostly to the area around Abbey Leaks if ever there was a swarm. Pat O'Brien was called, and off we'd set. With the basket. He did have one of the old straw baskets once, but it disintegrated, so he used what looked like a butter box most of the time.
Sort of a shutter on it there, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't remember him having a shutter on it because we put it down onto a heavy sheet or sack, and we left it there until the evening, and then we'd go and pick it up and take it back and run it on a plank up into a hive, and he'd pick out the queen then as they were walking the plank back into the hive. It was either an empty hive or a weak hive, it depended. If it was an empty hive, the whole swarm went in. But if it was a weak hive, he'd pick out the queen and went into the matchbox. Yeah.
Do you ever post a queen in a matchbox?
No,
Never.
I don't know what ever happened to the queen, because I thought it was a bit cruel, because there was a queen in the matchbox, and was he going to kill it? I think he kept them for a couple of days, and then when he put them into another hive, he was read whether they were weak or strong hive, how well they were doing. So he might have put a bee in, might put another queen into a hive, but he knew all the stuff.
And do you both keep bees yourselves now?
No.
No,
My father died in 1968,
same as Dad, yeah.
and then my brother emigrated to London in 1969. My mother trying to keep it going for a few years after that, but she was in her 60s then, so she wasn't able to carry on, and we gave it up then in the early 70s, and I held on to most of the equipment up to recent years, and I passed over all the crates and all to a cousin there only the last few years. But I remember a few other beekeepers around Wexford, South Wexford in the 60s. There was a man up in Fort Mountain there, Jimmy Cahoe. He was in his 80s then, and my brother Michael learned a bit from him, like. And there was a Pat O'Keefe down in Ballycapoe, Bridgetown, and then my uncle Jack Watson in Boortown, Bridgetown as well. And they used to bring all their honey to the markets in September. So there was a lot of interest in beekeeping in the 60s.
Yeah.
And there was good money in it as well. Like
And was it an extra few pounds for families?
Oh, it was for my
Well,
dad, yeah.
Yeah, we had 20 hives, so there could have been a few hundred weight of honey, like.
Yeah, we had
So-
8 of them.
Yeah.
Do you ever see any women keeping bees? Older women?
Well, my mum used to
Oh,
help
yeah.
my dad. She was she's a bit younger than that, but she helped him. My memories of it, when I was from the age of 6 or 7 on, I was just go back to the stable yard and get me this or get me that, and he's all the time teaching me about the bees and showing me the different bees and how to look after them. And then particularly if we went out to get a swarm, I'd be sent out along a branch of a tree he'd have the sheet down, and he'd say, "Now shake it," right?
All go down.
And it'd fall down. He'd put the cover on it, and that evening then we'd go back, retrieve it, and run it into a hive.
So you'd go around gathering up swarms?
Yeah, he was on call wherever there was swarm. There was a few of them we couldn't get. They were in attics of roofs, and we just couldn't get in to them, and we had to leave them there.
I remember only a few years ago at home, I seen a swarm of bees going over my house, and lucky enough it landed in the bush next door to me, and I contacted my cousin, and he came out and put him into a box, and like you said, Tony, he came back in the night time when they all settled down, like, you know, and brought him away. Like, that was probably someone else's loss. I think there was a hive only probably half a mile away from me, like, you know, so someone lost their valuable swarm.
And someone was telling me there earlier that they won't travel more than 3 miles
Probably that, yeah.
from where the hive is.
Mostly the swarm from that place to, there was evergreens, some yew and that on the old estate behind where the beehives were. And I'd say at least half the swarms initially went to they were hanging out in a ball from a branch on one of the evergreens, and they were the ones I remember having to go out along the branch and then give it a shake. And but the others then, as they were in some strange places, like on top of the swarm in the middle of Abbey Leaks, on top of the petrol pump. It got huge attention, that was, and it got mentioned in the Nationalist and Leinster Times as well.
What year was that?
I can't remember exactly. I think it was about 53 to 55. It was definitely that era, because the brother, patrician brother who was helping him, was Brother Albert, and he was in the national school. He was interested in the bees as well, and he helped my dad get that swarm off. There's some pictures I have of that recovery.
On top of a petrol pump?
On top of a petrol pump, Esso, in the middle of the square in Abbey Leaks. Yeah, everyone's gathered around to have a look at this. And he was called out and he got his veil. But looking at the photographs of it, he doesn't have the veil down at all. He was just straightforward.
Did you wear the veils when you were little?
No, I learned early on that I wasn't going to be a beekeeper, so I stayed away from, like, you know.
Yeah, I had the veil all the time. He made sure I had the veil. But the issue was when the last time I worked on him was in one evening. One of the hives was collapsing. Mum and Dad had passed on, and Mum was trying to look after him. And the legs were gone on this hive, so we got a new hive and cleaned the crates, the sections out. They were no problem, it excluded. But then we wanted to move the brood frames across. And halfway between the two hives, the bottom of the brood frame fell out, and the bees let fly at us. And we were fine, except for our ankles. And that's where we got badly stung, both ankles. And the doc after that said, you know, you got to give them up, because you get anytime you get stung now, you're liable to swell up, and it can be dangerous. So that's when we had to part with them.
Nearly self-sufficient in
Yeah.
the 50s and 60s. Like,
Yeah.
we had a few cattle at home, and we grew our own vegetables. We had hens, and we picked blackberries during the summer. That brought us in money, and we tinned beef as well. And so we were very self-sufficient and made our own butter as well. Like, and I suppose then beekeeping was another
Yeah.
part of it. Like, you know.
It was.
Are the bees an important part of the environment where we live?
Well, sure, without them, a lot of things won't survive. Like
I have a few apple trees in the garden,
yeah.
and you notice the difference in the summers when they're not pollinated. Last year we had hardly any apples at all, and I don't think the flowers actually came out.
Oh,
on
there's a massive flower this year now.
But
Right?
this year is terrific.
Yeah.
So long as we
If
have
the
the
weather-
bees.
If the weather holds fine
Yeah.
and doesn't rain or wind, it will be a bumper crop, I think.
Yeah.
You know, probably from where we are here at the moment, there bees used to be in the structure of the castle here.
That's right, yeah.
And that's where Matt saved some. Now that they're the old strain of the Irish bee, I think, aren't they?
Listen, thanks a million for your time, man. I really appreciate your
Yeah.
views and your stories.
Da